The O Cannabis Conference and Expo returns to Toronto June 1st through the 3rd, and there's still some good booth locations available. This exciting event is free for cannabis retailers and will feature Tommy Chong receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the O Cannabis Industry Awards. For more information about exhibiting or to register to attend, go to ocannabis.com. That's OCANNABIZ.com. Welcome back to The Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your cannabis business podcast. Today, we've got Don Skakie. He is the co-founder of Homegrown Washington and also has written some legislation or written parts of the bill for homegrown in Washington State. Don, thanks for being on The Talking Hedge.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh.
How long have you been
the bill is
working on
actually HB 1019.
HB 1019? How long have you been working on that?
On the bill specifically, about 3 years now, but on Homegrown, about 11 years.
So let's unpack that a little bit. Washington State, they voted for cannabis in was medical
2012. Oh, medical?
96, wasn't it?
98.
98.
Yeah, or no, maybe it was 96.
That might have been Cali. 96 is Cali, and then 98 is Washington.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Well, yep. You were right. But yeah, so yeah, it's been a while, right? And I think we're finally starting to see things kind of roll out. Virginia just announced that they were going to go medical and rec at the same time, and then that's going to take like 3 years. So better than the 11 years. So tell me a little bit about what's been going on and why it's been taking so long.
Sure. Well, you referred to medical. Medical was passed by Initiative 692 in Washington State. But after that passed, the legislature didn't seem to want to even touch the subject. And it took a couple of years before they even came up with a work group. It was healthcare people, law enforcement, patients, and they arrived at the presumptive 60-day supply, which at that time was 1.5 pounds and 15 plants. And then that pretty much was the standard. And back in I think it was 2010 or 11, we first started seeing medical come out of the closet. And pardon me, I have asthma, so I get a little cough, but that's about it. And then dispensaries started opening up, markets started opening up, and that really improved patient access to obtaining cannabis for those people that either couldn't grow because they weren't in housing that allowed for it, or maybe they just didn't have the talent. And then after that, when the initiative passed 502 in 2012, we rolled out, full legalization without homegrown. But then there was the Patient Protection Act, ESSB 5052. That passed, and it was actually pretty detrimental to patients. It eliminated their 15 plant count. And it required them to register with the state if they wanted to possess anything more than 4 plants or anything more than just a couple of ounces. So you can imagine that a patient with a need that doesn't smoke, maybe they needed tinctures or what other methods that take more cannabis to produce, their supply and access was severely restricted. And the problem it was restricted is because the retail system was so focused on high THC products and, turning a profit that they really didn't give patients much attention. Then the state came and they authorized medical authorization or endorsement for stores to carry products that required them to actually have a consultant on staff, because a lot of people coming into medical, they didn't have a background in cannabis and they needed some advice and guidance, but that was very lacking as well. And it's a big reason why a lot of patients are still not on the registry, not participating in the retail system, and either underground or getting it through the unregulated market. So homegrown was not part of that. And we've seen the other states, there's now 15 states, and Washington, one of the first, and Illinois, one of the last, are the 2 states that don't have it. New Jersey is still working things out, even though they passed, but It doesn't look like they're going to have home grow either. And this is not something that's new. Colorado had it from the start. The other states, no state that's had home grow in their law has ever repealed it. It has, I mean, if you Google home grow arrests, they all relate to black market activity where people come in and they don't live there. They're basically using the house as cover for criminal activity. But the home growing is really specific to someone that just wants to grow a few plants to control what they take into their own bodies. I mean, when you grow it, you know it. So we think it's time, and we found legislators that agree, and a surprising amount of legislators agree that this is something that the state should be able to trust our citizenry with. And we hope that this bill passes this year. This bill's actually gone further than any previous effort. It's more extensive than any previous legislation. And we are just at this point waiting for an executive session of the Appropriations Committee to hopefully move on to a floor vote in the House.
Do you think cannabis being deemed essential business during the last year at the onset of the pandemic had something to do with these members of government in the House and Senate being more involved or interested in home grow? And and then I want to follow up with why, because it seems like that goes counterintuitive because there's no tax revenue.
Right. Well, cannabis is essential business because there is so much tax revenue. It was almost $500 million in just excise tax. And overall, the state does receive about over $1 billion worth of benefit from cannabis business activity, be that from B&O taxes or salary deductions from employees. And, all those employees actually spend those wages in their local economies. So, it's not just the state that's benefiting, it's cities and neighborhoods and everyday people that benefit from cannabis being legal.
Exactly.
So,
So why would they have home grow? Why would they back that?
because it's something that people want and it's something that's not problematic. We've had a lot of interest in licensees wanting to explore the new market. Currently they're able to sell farm direct to patients that are on the registry. They can sell them seeds, plants, clones, all that. But this would open up a new market of home growers that would also want those same items. And although the language is not in the bill at this time, I could see it being a good revenue stream, not only for businesses for profit, but for revenue for the state. Because I would imagine that those products would still be taxed at the the 37% excise tax rate
Mhm.
as well. So, but
Yeah,
home grow
you said
is
it so as a matter of fact. You just said, "Oh, well, they just want to do it because they're representing us, like as government reps should represent us." But in my experience, it's been like if it doesn't generate them revenue or money or taxes or whatever else, they don't really care about the people. But maybe that's what local government is supposed to be, representing the people. You mentioned that Washington and Illinois are the only ones that don't have home grow, so it's not that common to not have home grow. Why is it that these two states are the only ones to not allow it?
well, I think it goes back to your question about the legislators themselves. These people get elected by the votes of their constituencies, and they've found that a lot of that, a line that we like to use when we talk to legislators is, "Do you know that cannabis is very popular in your district?" So, and they realize that. But to some degree, reefer madness has not gone away. A lot of people, especially more conservative people, still feel it's the devil's lettuce, and they have all these overblown concerns that really don't bear out. In fact, they always say marijuana is a gateway drug. Everybody that went on to other things started with marijuana. Well, Happy Meals are gateway drugs then too. So
There was a big discrepancy about diversion to the illicit market, and that was a big thing. But we've seen from every other rollout that hasn't really happened. You don't see people selling bathtub gin or cigarettes out of the boot of their car. So
Right.
is that even a legitimate argument anymore?
Well, if you go on our website, Homegrown Washington, to the About page, there's actually a short 1 minute video there that we produced last August, and or maybe it was October, but it actually shows some representative homegrown gardens. And one of the scenes in there is of 6 plants hanging and drying in front of a fan. And when you look at that image, you can see that we're not talking about a lot of marijuana at all. So to consider that somebody would grow 6 plants, these are people with otherwise fulfilling lives. They got jobs, they've got families, they might be involved in civics or, little league and everything else with their families. But to think that somebody like that in the current situation is going to grow 6 plants so that they can take the time to go sell it on the street or in a parking lot or attempt to divert it to the black market that they probably have no contact with. They're not only not going to contact the black market, they're not going to compete with them or the state. It's really just not a reasonable premise to consider.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I, in fact, stopped growing back in medical. You could grow up to 15 plants, and then you could grow for two other people. So you could grow up to 45
45,
plants.
yeah, the collective.
Right. And so that's what I would do. A friend of mine had multiple sclerosis. He's since passed away of MS. But that's what I did until wholesale prices dipped down below $3. And then that's really my break even with the electricity bill and everything. So I stopped. I would
Right.
think that more people would probably look at that too and say, okay, convenience. It's not that easy to grow cannabis. People think it's just weed, and it's not. Um, but what is the importance of it? I mean, I think economically, we can look at all the picks and shovels and ancillary businesses. You're going to sell more soil and all these things. It's going to increase, I think, a lot of sales locally. I think it's a good thing. But in your own words and opinions, why is homegrown so important?
Well, it's about freedom, honestly. We're supposed to live in a free country. And if you're not hurting anybody else, then why shouldn't I be able to grow a few plants? Before Ainslinger went to Congress and had it made illegal, it was in our pharmacopoeia. The AMA, because it was referred to as marijuana in that testimony and not as cannabis, the proper name, it kind of slid through unnoticed. And after the fact, people were pretty upset, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle at that time. And it's taken us over 80 years to get back to this point. So,
Mhm.
I mean, people do all sorts of things that aren't good for them, but it's a matter of freedom of choice in this country, and reform of marijuana laws and home grow should be part of that.
Well, we've been to a lot of events, over the last few years in the cannabis industry and in hemp as CBD has been taken off. Where do you kind of see events moving? Because it used to be we would call a shit show a dirt show, one of these like shows where, you know, you weren't really interested, and there was just a lot of companies selling dirt. Um,
Right.
Whereas like a home grow that could easily turn into a dirt show on purpose. So as you're
Right.
selling all those picks and shovels and dirts, I'm wondering if the post-apocalyptic era with events coming back, that could be a good thing. What will events look like for home grow post-pandemic?
Well, it's hard to say. Originally when Oregon first passed their legalization, they had a competition at the state fair with a blue ribbon winner. I mean, that is making cannabis regular in society, as regular as anything else. I mean, I can go into my supermarket and walk down the aisles with bottle after bottle of alcohol.
Mhm.
So I don't know that cannabis will get to that point. I don't know that we want to get it to that point. I go to other states. I go to Colorado to see my daughter, and I have a lot of contacts in Oregon, and in Washington, where you have to go to the store and buy it in a sealed package, you can't look at it, you can't smell it, and you can't pick it out, is vastly different than when I can go to Colorado
Mhm.
and not only look at the jar, but I can tell the bud tender, ooh, I want that nug right there, and they pick it
Mhm.
out and sell it to me.
Mhm.
So, it's like when you go to the store, I know you can buy a six pack of tomatoes, but you can also go to the stand and pick out whichever ones you want, be it bananas or oranges or apples or any of that. And I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be. We're not talking about nuclear waste here. We're
Mhm.
talking about a plant. And, there's a lot of concern about if you have home grow that the kids will get to it. Well, kids shouldn't be hopping fences and stealing other people's property. Those are crimes. And to be honest, they're more likely just to have an older person go to the store and buy it for them because it's ready made.
Mhm.
You can't just steal cannabis and then stick it in a pipe and smoke it. You've got to process it and cure it. And it's quite a long wait time. And I don't think kids are willing to put in that kind of effort.
Yeah,
So,
Halloween is always funny every year when the hyperbole hits the
right.
news waves and people think we're gonna waste edibles on kids. It just never happens.
Yeah.
Um,
To
you
go to
unfor
go back to your point about events though, Uh, I think that as cannabis does become more regular in society, we will see events that went on like they did before. Uh, you know, right now in law, you can't have licensees cannot have a competition. They can't have a cup. But if I was to have a home growers cup and just have it be an ego thing of you come and you compete, and there is no, maybe you get a little, hey, here's your prize. It's we're not talking about a money making venture for the person growing. It's more of an ego thing,
Mhm.
a recognition amongst your peers, and I think that's great. I think that events like that, little conventions, I'm sure that home growers, especially those that aren't good, would love to have an event where they can talk to people like Ed Rosenthal and Jorge Cervantes, master growers that
Mhm.
have done this forever. Uh, in Seattle here, we used to have gardening with Cisco. A guy had a garden show on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and he was a master gardener from UW, and you talk to him about your stuff in your yard. So I imagine that one day there'll be a radio show called Gardening for Frisco, and you can talk to him about whatever problems you have in your cannabis garden. And we found that the people that I've talked to, at least, if they've never grown before and they grow cannabis, that tends to inspire them to grow other things like vegetables or flowers or plants. So I think it'd be good. It's good for people. And people who are stuck home now with COVID, they need something to do to keep their minds and hands busy.
Yeah, we might not make it to a farmer's market. There's gonna be rec stores and things like that, even for medical to be sold in. So it's not gonna be totally normalized, but it will be nice in the eventuality, um, when we do have home grow. What's it gonna take for that bill? You mentioned early on in the podcast that you've been working on for 3 years. Is 2021 the year that it passes? What's needed? What's required? How's it gonna pass?
Well, we are working with the Cannabis Alliance, an industry trade group, and we're working with the Scotts Company, most famous for Miracle Grow. And the Scotts Company owns Sunlight Supply down here in Vancouver, Washington, locally. And they've got bought up by Hawthorne Garden Supply, which is one of the Scotts subsidiaries. So they have a fulfillment center where people can order online and they can get all sorts of equipment, soil, amendments, all of that. And they see this as a natural expansion of their business. So they would like this bill to pass. So if we can get through the appropriations committee, and the sponsor there, Tim Ormsby, the chairman, I'm sorry, not the sponsor, the chairman is a co-sponsor. So we're hoping to see that executive session happen and this move out onto the floor, out of committee and onto the floor. And from our head count of votes there, it looks like we have a very strong chance of passing the floor, and which would mean passing the House of Representatives. So from that point, and we have our cutoff for the bills in the House of Origin is February 22nd. So if we can get out and onto the floor and pass by February 22nd, or I'm sorry, no, it would move to the floor by the 22nd. If we can get out of the House of Origin by that cutoff date that I don't have right in front of me, it would then go over to the Senate, and then we'd have a few hearings over there, another floor vote, and then pending any amendments, the bill would be passed and the governor could sign it. So our chances look better this year than they have ever looked in the past.
That's good news. Um, is there anything that you'd like to say to any other state, including Illinois or anybody else, Virginia or Kentucky, when they figure out that they need to legalize to fund their pension system? Any of these onboarding states, New York or whatever? Any advice, anything that you think is worthy, something that they should hear?
Sure. Well, on that point, I've actually been contacted by the New Jersey and New York efforts. We have collaborated, we have shared our experiences, and we're even talking about having a nationwide group that's more collaborative. You know, activists, we're not in this for the money. I've not been paid for my work. I don't care to be paid for my work. John Kingsbury and myself, the co-founders of Homegrown Washington, we basically paid for this effort out of pocket. And but we don't want to have to see everybody else start from scratch. There's been a lot of work that's been done that others can benefit from if they only know about it. And so that kind of a collaboration, I think, would be very helpful in moving things much more forward, much more quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, very similar to the scenarios that you and I had being on the same board to try and overturn the felony for marijuana lounges, which is a
Right.
Class C felony to own and operate a marijuana lounge, to try and work with other states and other areas. As you remember, we covered in 2019 8 different states' bills, including Illinois and everywhere else that had.
Alaska and
Yeah,
yeah.
all of those, we covered those for at least 9 months. Every single time we met, bi-monthly, we would talk about that and try to get involved in Massachusetts and other states to cross-pollinate ideas and try to make all of that better. So sounds very familiar and similar to all of those efforts.
Yeah,
Um,
that's another area that has not been problematic in law. And I don't get it. They don't want people consuming in public. All right. So the natural thing, I mean, it's just like you don't want people walking around the corner or up and down the street with an open bottle in their hands.
it's almost
So why
entrapment.
not give cannabis consumers a club to go consume at?
Right. It's almost entrapment where you're going to sell something and then ticket them for not consuming it somewhere. As a
Right.
tourist, you can't go to your hotel. You can't even consume in your car because that's public, I guess. So yeah,
Yep.
it's pretty ridiculous. All of these laws, like you mentioned, are like very early on, we're adults. It's because we should be doing this. And so, yeah, I think that as soon as you can grow at home and have it normalized, as well as being able to see through a window people consuming, that is the window into the soul of the community, I think, is the cannabis cafes, and all of
Right.
that will eventually be normalized. um
Well,
very soon.
I don't know about that. I mean, even right now, when you look at bars and taverns and lounges, uh, it's a rare occurrence that you can actually go up and stare inside the window.
Mhm.
Most of those places are blacked out. I guess that's not consistent across the board, but it's usual, it's regular,
Mhm.
it's nothing, it's not, it's no big deal.
Mhm.
And smoking in a club setting shouldn't be a big deal either.
Mhm. Well, in celebration of the Homegrown Summit, I think it's the first annual. Is there anything that we missed that we should be throwing out to the people that are interested in home grow locally, domestically, internationally?
Well, my advice to anyone that has an interest in legalizing home grow would be let your legislator know. Let the people that represent you, your representatives, your senators, And at the national level, your congressmen and representatives there. Let them know that you support normalization of marijuana laws, cannabis laws. In Washington State here, there's a bill 1210, HB 1210, that's going to change the word cannabis in place of marijuana throughout state law. And that's, it seems like a small step, but it's significant. We shouldn't be in a panic about a plant.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And it sounds kind of cheesy to say, "Oh, call your legislator," and you hear that and it's kind of in one ear, not the other. But like legitimately, people, I went down to the Capitol in Washington. I went and talked to people and gave my own story about how my friend doesn't like Marinol. He doesn't like synthetic cannabis. He wouldn't take Epidiolex. He wanted to smoke a joint. He didn't even want to vape. He
Right.
wanted to combust, and that was his choice. When I expressed that to people in the House and the Senate down in our state capital, people were like, "Oh, really? Wow, I didn't know that." And
Right.
so you kind of take things for granted and you assume that there's other people doing it for you, but sometimes you have to do it
Yeah.
yourself.
No, there's not.
There's not. Yeah, tell your story because that's more impactful than the, anecdotal evidence that you could say, "Oh, my grandma's doing great." Well, go down there and tell them that story firsthand. It's going to be a lot more impactful than somebody else telling it for you.
Right. And you hit the nail right on the head when you say they don't know. Our elected officials come out of the constituencies that they grew up with. And if cannabis is not their thing, their experience is limited. And that's true for every issue. That's why lobbyists exist. And even though I'm not a paid lobbyist, I'm a lobbyist. As a constituent, when you bring your issue to your legislator, you are lobbying. So I think the problem is a lot of people are just totally unfamiliar with the process. You should find out how to contact your legislator. They want to hear from you. Honestly, they do. They're happy to meet with you. You should know what you want to talk to them about. You should know what you want them to do. And because they are unfamiliar with your subject, you should offer them a solution of how to fix the issue to your satisfaction. So, check with your legislative information offices. Find out who your legislators are. In Washington, you can just Google Washington District Finder, put your information in there. It'll tell you what district you're in, who represents you, and how to contact them. And then write them an email. Write them an email and then follow up with a phone call and talk to the assistant and say, "Hey, did you get my email? I want a meeting." And they'll set that up for you. That's their job. They're not people above us. They work for us. And, as their employer, you should tell them what work to do.
Yeah, and especially on a day like lobby days where they try and be available for everybody, you can set up 4 hours worth of appointments, 15-minute blocks, and just bounce from office to office and meet with half a dozen or 10, 15 reps, from around the area. So I would highly recommend you do that. You get a lot more out of your day by doing that, and it's incredibly beneficial.
That
Um,
that's a great way to get your feet wet, and meet other like-minded people, and learn a bit about how to handle yourself. But the best thing to do, if you really want your legislators' attention, is to get a one-on-one meeting
mhm.
where you get the whole 15 minutes. And I've had meetings run long. If your legislator knows that you know what you're talking about and has an interest in what you're saying, your meeting might run an hour.
Hmm.
It's up to them, depends on what their availability and what their level of interest is.
Right. If people do have a high level of interest in the Washington home grow and or home grow for their own state, how can they get a hold of you? Where are you at? Either social media, email. How can people get a hold of
Sure.
you?
Well, we have a page on Facebook, Homegrown Washington, one word homegrow, second word Washington. Our website is homegrowwashington.com. Right now, it's specific to Washington State, but there's a lot of great information there that you can get ideas from for other states. You can always email us at homegrowwashington at gmail.com. We also have info at homegrowwashington.com. The first one we didn't have a website yet, and now we do. And I'm Don Skakie. I'm the only Don Skakie on Facebook, and I'm public. So message me, and I'll be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, all about House Bill 1019. Use that as a template or an example for Homegrown, kicking off the Homegrown Summit today. All right, with that, I think we're going to roll this one up. I want to thank my guest, Don Skakie. He's a co-founder, Homegrown Washington. Don, thanks for being on the Talking Hedge.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.
Hello, hemp friends. This is your host, Morris, from Volume Up, the Let's Talk Hemp podcast, where we explore and discuss all things hemp all the time. From industrial to nutritional to therapeutic to lifestyle, hemp has a place and a home pretty much everywhere. Download episodes now of the Let's Talk Hemp podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Come get loud with me on Volume Up as we take industrial hemp to a whole new level in 2022 and beyond.